According to the psychology dictionary, relationship means particular type of connection between two or more entities or phenomena. A binding, usually a continuous association between individuals wherein one has some influence on feelings or actions of the other. Let us discuss the different kinds of relationship in psychology one by one. Association. Association, the general psychological principle linked with the phenomena of recollection or memory. The principle originally stated that the act of remembering or recalling any past experience would also bring to the fore other events or experiences that had become related in one or more specific ways to the experience being remembered. Over time, the application of this principle was expanded to cover almost everything that could happen in mental life except original sensations. As a result, associationism became a theoretical view embracing the whole of psychology. The concept of an association of ideas was first used by English philosopher John Locke in an essay concerning human understanding. Scottish philosopher David Hume maintained in a treatise of human nature that the essential forms of association were by resemblance, by contiguity in time or place, and by cause and effect. In the Principles of Psychology, American philosopher and psychologist William James shifted emphasis away from an association of ideas to an association of central nervous processes caused by overlapping or immediately successive stimuli. In 1903, Russian physiologist Ivan P. Pavlov theorized that all behavior could be derived from original and conditioned reflexes. The conditioned reflex theories and many of the behaviorist theories in the early 20th century stemmed from an association psychology of behavior, meaning that they were subject to the same criticisms levied against those doctrines of the association of ideas. American psychologist Edward L. Thorndike, for example, showed that mere repetition does little or nothing to establish connections between stimulus and response. Some researchers alleged a direct effect of knowledge of results, while others, such as American psychologist Clark Hill Hull, in the book Principles of Behavior, produced a complete account of learning based upon need reduction, that is, reducing the strength of the drive, linking stimulus and response under various experimental conditions. While these thinkers did not demand the rejection of associationist principles, they did argue for a more conservative application of such principles. There were some, however, such as the Gestalt psychologist, who called for a total rejection of associationism so far as higher mental processes were concerned. Associationist theories, as all embracing explanatory principles in psychology, have received considerable criticism. Currently, very few, if any, psychologists accord these theories the range and power once claimed for them. Many will agree, however, that association remains an important and effective principle that is active in all instances of learning through accumulated experience. Comparison. Social comparison theory, initially proposed by social psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954, centers on the belief that there is a drive within individuals to gain accurate self-evaluations. The theory explains how individuals evaluate their own opinions and abilities by comparing themselves to others in order to reduce uncertainty in these domains and learn how to define the self. Following the initial theory, research began to focus on social comparison as a way of self-enhancement, introducing the concepts of downward and upward comparisons and expanding the motivations of social comparisons. Festinger provided 9 main hypotheses. In his first hypothesis, he stated that humans have a basic drive to evaluate their opinions and abilities, and that people evaluate themselves through objective, non-social means. Second, Festinger stated that if objective, non-social means were not available, that people evaluate their opinions and abilities by comparison to other people. Next, he hypothesized that the tendency to compare oneself to another person decreases as the difference between their opinions and abilities becomes more divergent. In other words, if someone is much different from you, you are less likely to compare yourself to that person. He next hypothesized that there is a unidirectional drive upward in the case of abilities, which is largely absent in opinions. This drive refers to the value that is placed on doing better and better. Next, Festinger hypothesizes that there are non social restraints that make it difficult or even impossible to change one's ability, and these restraints are largely absent for opinions. In other words, people can change their opinions when they want to, but no matter how motivated individuals may be to improve their ability, there may be other elements that make this impossible. Festinger goes on to hypothesize that a cessation of comparison with others is accompanied by hostility or derogation to the extent that continued comparison with those persons implies unpleasant consequences. Next, any factors which increase the importance of some particular group as a comparison group from some particular opinion or ability will increase the pressure towards uniformity concerning that ability or opinion within that group. If discrepancies arise between the evaluator and comparison group, there is a tendency to reduce the divergence by either attempting to persuade others or changing their personal views to attain uniformity. However, the importance, relevance, and attraction to a comparison group that affects the original motivation for comparison mediates the pressures towards uniformity. His next hypothesis states that if persons who are very divergent from one's own opinion or ability are perceived as different from oneself on attributes consistent with the divergence, the tendency to narrow the range of comparability becomes stronger. Lastly, Festinger hypothesized that when there is a range of opinion or ability in a group, the relative strength of three manifestations of pressures towards uniformity will be different for those who are close to the mode of the group than for those who are distant from the mode. Since its inception, the initial framework has undergone several advances. Key among these are developments in understanding the motivations that underlie social comparisons and the particular types of social comparisons that are made. Motives that are relevant to social comparison include self enhancement, maintenance of a positive self evaluation, components of attributions and validation, and the avoidance of closure. While there have been changes in Festinger's original concept, many fundamental aspects remain, including the prevalence of the tendency towards social comparison and the general process that is social comparison. Self evaluation. According to Thornton and Arrowwood, self evaluation is one of the functions of social comparison. This is one process that underlies how an individual engages in social comparison. Each individual's specific goals will influence how they engage in social comparison. For self evaluation, people tend to choose a comparison target that is similar to themselves. Specifically, they are most interested in choosing a target who shares some distinctive characteristics with themselves. Research suggests that most people believe that choosing a similar target helps ensure the accuracy of the self evaluation. However, individuals do not always act as unbiased self evaluators, and accurate self evaluations may not be the primary goal of social comparison. Self enhancement. Individuals may also seek self enhancement or to improve their self esteem. They may interpret, distort, or ignore the information gained by social comparison to see themselves more positively and further their self enhancement goals. They will also choose to make upward, comparing themselves to someone better off, or downward, comparing themselves to someone worse off. Comparisons, depending on which strategy will further their self enhancement goals. They may also avoid making comparisons, period, or avoid making certain types of comparisons. Specifically, when an individual believes that their ability in specific area is low, they will avoid making upward social comparisons in that area. Unlike for self-evaluation goals, people engaging in social comparison with a goal of self-enhancement may not seek out a target that is similar to themselves. Sequencing. Sequence learning is inherent to human ability because it is an integrated part of conscious and non-conscious learning as well as activities. Sequences of information or sequences of actions are used in various everyday tasks, from sequencing sounds in speech to sequencing movements in typing or playing instruments to sequencing actions in driving an automobile. Sequence learning can be used to study skill acquisition and in studies of various groups ranging from neuropsychological patients to infants. According to Ritter and Nerb, the order in which material is presented can strongly influence what is learned, how fast performance increases, and sometimes even whether the material is learned at all. Sequence learning, more known and understood as a form of explicit learning, is now also being studied as a form of implicit learning as well as other forms of learning. Sequence learning can also be referred to as sequential behavior, behavior sequencing, and serial order in behavior. Types of sequential learning. There are two broad categories of sequential learning, explicit and implicit, with subcategories. Explicit sequence learning has been known and studied since the discovery of sequence learning. However, recently, implicit sequence learning has gained more attention and research. A form of implicit sequence learning, refers to the underlying methods of learning that people are unaware of. In other words, learning without knowing. The exact properties and number of mechanisms of implicit learning are debated. Other forms of implicit sequence learning include motor sequence learning, temporal sequence learning, and associative sequence learning. Cause and effect. Think about when you woke up today. In all likelihood, you are probably woken up by the sound of an alarm clock. The loud sound of the alarm was the cause. Without the alarm, you probably would have overslept. In this scenario, the alarm had the effect of you waking up at a certain time. This is what we mean by cause and effect. A cause effect relationship is a relationship in which one event, the cause, makes another event happen, the effect. One cause can have several effects. For example, let us say you are conducting an experiment using regular high school students with no athletic ability. The purpose of our experiment is to see if becoming an all-star athlete would increase their attractiveness and popularity ratings among other high school students. Suppose that your results showed that not only did the students view the all-star athletes as more attractive and popular, but the self-confidence of the athletes also improved. Here, we see that one cause, that is, having the status of an all-star athlete, has two effects: increased self-confidence and higher attractiveness ratings among other students. In order to establish a cause-effect relationship, three criteria must be met. The first criteria is that the cause has to occur before the effect. This is also known as temporal precedence. In the example above, the students had to become all-star athletes before their attractiveness ratings and self-confidence improved. For example, let us say that you are conducting an experiment to see if making a loud noise would cause newborns to cry. In this example, the loud noise would have to occur before the newborns cried. In both examples, the causes occurred before the effects, so the first criterion was met. Second, whenever the cause happens, the effect must also occur. Consequently, if the cause does not happen, then the effect must not take place. The strength of the cause also determines the strength of the effect. Think about the example with the all-star athlete. The research study found that popularity and self-confidence did not increase for the students who did not become all-star athletes. Let us assume we also found that better the student rankings in sports, that is, the stronger they become in athletics compared to their peers, the more popular and confident the student became. For this example, criterion 2 is met. Let us say that for our newborn experiment, we found that as soon as the loud noise occurred, the newborn cried, and that the newborns did not cry in absence of the sound. We also found that the louder the sound, the louder the newborn cried. In this example, we see that the strength of the loud sound also determines how hard the newborn cries. Again, criterion 2 has been met for this example. The final criterion is that there are no other factors that can explain the relationship between cause and effect. For instance, let us say, while observing the newborns, you discovered that newborns cried periodically without the loud sound. You also know that it is typical for the newborns to cry when they are hungry, need a diaper, or miss their primary caregiver. It would be impossible to say that whether or not the crying was caused by the newborn being hungry, needing a new diaper, or if they just missed their parents, unless you account for all these factors in your experiment. As you can see, the third criterion is difficult to meet. Mind map. A mind map is a diagram used to represent concepts, ideas, tasks, or other items linked to a central theme. In a mind map, the central theme is often illustrated with a graphical image. The ideas related to the main theme radiate in a clockwise direction from that central image as branches. Topics and ideas of lesser importance are represented as sub-branches of the relevant branch. By presenting the relationships between ideas in a non-linear graphical manner, mind mapping encourages a brainstorming approach to the handling and organization of information. Mind maps have numerous applications, both in the education sector, where they are used as an aid to studying and learning, and in the business sector to facilitate critical thinking, problem solving, and decision making. Mind maps have many strengths and benefits. Simple, easy to create, easy to expand, easy to filter, visual, easy to remember, easy to overview, highlight links and relationships, creative, stimulate imagination, boost motivation, and improve productivity, collaborative. They promote team spirit, encourage group communication, and optimize work processes. The theory behind mind mapping. People have been organizing their thoughts for centuries by drawing graphical, tree like representations of their ideas, particularly in the areas of psychology and education. The concept of the modern mind map was developed by Tony Buzan, a British psychologist and businessman who argued that the radial structure of mind maps, reinforced by the use of lines, symbols, words, color, and images, is much more in line with the brain's natural way of processing information than the traditional linear approach. According to the mind mapping theory, the use of mind maps is therefore not only significantly more conducive to memory retention, but also promotes creativity, organization, and analytical skills. The five essential characteristics of a mind map. The main idea, subject, or focus is crystallized in a central image. The main themes radiate from the central image as branches. Each branch includes a key image or word drawn on its associated line. Topics of lesser importance are represented as twigs of the relevant branch. The branches form a connected tree like structure. Building a mind map typically consists of the following steps. Start from the central concept or issue. Create branches and sub-branches to capture all related ideas and issues. Add pictures, documents, hyperlinks as needed to each branch. Arrange the branches logically. Create visual links between related branches. Present or distribute your mind map. In this lesson, we have broadly discussed about the relationships in cognitive psychology, associations, comparisons, sequencing, cause-effect formulations, and mind maps.